All the other grandchildren got $100 each, Blake. Her daughter, well, she can wait until she's older to understand the value of money. My mother, Dorothy, was sitting in her favorite armchair in the ornate living room, handing out white envelopes to each of the children gathered around her as if it were a royal ceremony. The smile on her face couldn't hide the contempt when his eyes fell on Emma, my 8-year-old daughter, who watched silently from the corner of the room. "She's the same age as Tommy, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady as I watched my 8-year-old nephew tear open his envelope and scream with joy at the sight of the green bills. "It's not the same thing," Dorothy replied in that icy tone I knew so well. "Emma isn't, well, you understand. My name is Blake, he's 34 years old, and 6 years ago he legally adopted Emma when he married her mother, Jennifer. To him, Emma has always been simply his daughter. To his mother, she would apparently always be Jennifer's daughter." I watched Emma clutching the drawing she had made especially for Grandma Dorothy, a picture of the whole family together, including herself holding hands with me, with "I love you, Grandma" written in purple crayon at the top. She had worked on it for 3 days, carefully choosing each color, asking if it was pretty enough. At that moment, watching my daughter try not to cry as she watched her cousins count her bills, something inside me finally broke. "It's okay, Grandma," Emma whispered in a voice so small it broke my heart. "I don't need money." Dorothy didn't even look at her. She was too busy laughing with Tommy about how he would spend his special allowance from Grandma. That's when I remembered the conversation I had with Jennifer 3 months ago, after the last incident at my sister's birthday party. Jennifer had given me an ultimatum that night: either he sets limits for his mother, or we stop coming to these family gatherings. Emma is starting to believe she's worth less than the other kids. She was right. And he had a plan. "Emma," I called softly, "did you bring that special letter we wrote together?" Her eyes lit up instantly. For weeks, we had been working in secret on something I hoped I would never have to use. But watching my mother deliberately humiliate my daughter in front of the whole family, I knew the time had come. Emma ran to her pink backpack and returned holding a pink envelope sealed with Grandma Dorothy written in her childish handwriting. "Grandma," Emma said, her voice now stronger and more determined, "Daddy said that if you forgot about me again, I should give you this." The silence that followed was deafening. All the side conversations ceased. My brothers stopped talking about sports. His sisters-in-law interrupted their gossip. Even the children stopped playing. Dorothy took the envelope with a confused, almost amused expression, as if it were just another child's drawing. She had no idea what she was about to read. Neither did her brothers. Nor did anyone else in the room. But I knew. And as I watched my mother slowly open that envelope, I felt a mixture of nervousness and determination running through her veins. If you're following this story and want to know what my mother's explosive reaction was when she read that letter, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple piece of paper completely changed the dynamics of our family. Because what Dorothy was about to discover about Emma, about him, and about the last 6 years of our lives was going to make her rethink every decision she had made as a grandmother. And when she finished reading, nothing would ever be the same again. Dorothy slowly unfolded the pink sheet of paper, his eyes scanning the first few lines with that condescending expression he had known since childhood. The same look she used when he brought home school reports with average grades, or when he introduced Jennifer as his girlfriend for the first time. But as she continued reading, I saw her expression change completely. The smile disappeared first. Then the frown. His lips began to move silently, as if he were rereading certain parts to make sure he had understood correctly. "What is this?" she murmured, her voice losing its usual authoritative tone. He didn't answer. I just watched, arms crossed, as my mother discovered exactly what Emma and I thought about his last 6 years as a selective grandmother. The letter began simply, "Dear Grandma Dorothy, he helped me write this letter because he said that sometimes adults need to read things on paper to understand them better." But what followed was a detailed list, written with a brutal honesty that only an 8-year-old can express. Emma had catalogued, with my help, every time he felt excluded, every inferior gift, every invitation denied, every moment he was treated like a second-class citizen in his own family. When Tommy got a new bike for his birthday and I got a used book about animals. When all the cousins went to the water park and he said I couldn't go because it wasn't a family occasion. When he told the other kids that I was his daughter in front of everyone at last Christmas party. Dorothy looked up from the letter, searching my face with an expression somewhere between indignation and panic. "Blake, this is ridiculous," She's making it up. Making it up? I interrupted, keeping my voice low but firm. Like the $50 you gave Tommy to buy ice cream last week, but told Emma that kids don't need money for nonsense. The silence that followed was broken only by the muffled sound of the television in the next room, where my father was watching the football game, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the living room. Dorothy went back to reading the letter, her hands shaking slightly. I knew she had reached the part where Emma described how she felt during family gatherings. I sit quietly in the corner and pretend I don't care when he forgets my name or when he talks about his real grandchildren, as if I'm not here. But I do care. Daddy said it's okay to feel sad when someone doesn't treat us with love. I remembered the night I helped Emma write those words. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her little legs dangling from the high chair, carefully choosing each sentence. Daddy, she had asked, why doesn't Grandma Dorothy like me? It was the hardest question I'd ever had to answer. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that my own mother, a woman who prided herself on her Christian faith and traditional family values, simply refused to accept that love isn't determined by biology? It's not that she doesn't like you, sweetie, I had replied at the time. It's that she's forgotten how to show real love. But the truth was more complex and more painful. Dorothy had always been a woman of appearances. For her, the perfect family meant perfect photos, perfect stories, perfect lineage. When he divorced his first wife after only 2 years of childless marriage, she had breathed a sigh of relief. Better to discover the incompatibility now, he had commented. When I started dating Jennifer, a single mother who worked as a nurse and lived in a small apartment with her 2-year-old daughter, Dorothy never said anything directly. But her expressions spoke volumes. Jennifer seems like a nice girl, she would say, always followed by a but, as if she were constantly looking for flaws to justify her disapproval. The worst moment had been during our engagement, when Dorothy suggested we have the ceremony just for close family, and then muttered something about not being sure it would be appropriate to include Emma in the official photos, since it was her wasn't technically family yet. It was at that moment that I understood that my mother did not see Emma as my daughter. She saw her as an obstacle, a complication, a constant reminder that I had chosen a path that did not meet her expectations of family perfection. Over the next 6 years, Dorothy developed a subtle but devastatingly effective system of making Emma feel like an intruder in his own family. At birthday parties, Emma always received the simplest and cheapest gift. At Christmas, while my nephews received elaborate toys and designer clothes, Emma received used books or basic stationery. When Dorothy organized activities for the grandchildren, Emma was mysteriously never included in the initial plans. "Oh, of course Emma can come too," Dorothy would say when asked, as if it were an afterthought. The cruelest thing was how Dorothy referred to Emma in front of other people. Never as my granddaughter Emma, always as Jennifer's daughter or Blake's girl. Jennifer had noticed it first. She tried to bring it up with me several times, but I always made excuses. "She just needs time to get used to it," he would say. "My mom is traditional, but deep down she loves Emma." Lies she told herself because facing the truth would mean facing her own cowardice in not adequately protecting her daughter. The last straw came 3 months ago, during my nephew Tommy's 10th birthday party. Dorothy organized an elaborate party in the backyard, hired a clown, ordered a custom cake, and invited all the neighborhood children. Emma spent the entire party sitting alone in a corner, watching the other children play. When the clown asked all the cousins to gather for a special activity, Dorothy deliberately guided each child to the center of the yard, leaving Emma out. It was Jennifer who finally pulled him aside that day. "Look at her daughter, Blake," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Look how she's trying to be invisible so she doesn't bother anyone. This isn't the confident child we know at home. This has to stop." That night, after Emma fell asleep, I sat by her bed and promised myself that I would never again allow anyone, not even my own mother, to make my daughter feel small. That's when I started planning the letter. Now, watching Dorothy finish reading Emma's carefully chosen words, I felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. The letter was only the first step. Dorothy slowly folded the paper and placed it on the coffee table, avoiding his gaze. "Blake, this is a terrible misunderstanding," she said finally, her voice sounding less convincing than usual. "I treat Emma exactly as I treat all my grandchildren." "Mom," I replied calmly, "stop." Because what Dorothy didn't know was that the letter was just a warning. A final polite request that he change his behavior before I revealed what I had really discovered about her during my investigation over the past 3 months. And when she read the second letter, the one I still carried in my pocket, her reaction would be very different. Much more intense. "Blake, you're completely overreacting," Dorothy said, trying to regain her authoritative composure, but I could see her hands trembling slightly as she folded Emma's letter. "Every family has its particular dynamics. Unique dynamics," I repeated, feeling anger rising in my throat like lava. "Mom, you literally told Emma that she could wait until she's older, while the other kids got $100 each." Dorothy straightened up in her chair, assuming the defensive posture I had known since childhood, when he was caught red-handed doing something wrong but refused to admit it. "Tommy and Maddie are older, more responsible with money. Tommy is exactly the same age as Emma." I exploded, his voice echoing through the silent room. 8 years old. They were born 2 months apart. That's when Dorothy made the mistake that would change everything forever. "Well, Blake," she said in that icy condescending tone, "Tommy is his blood grandson. Emma is, well, she's Jennifer's daughter that he decided to adopt. It's not the same thing." The silence that followed was so deep that I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. My brothers, David and Michael, stopped talking about sports. Their wives stopped fiddling with their cell phones. Even the children fell silent, sensing the electric tension in the air. Emma, my little Emma, sat in the corner of the room with wide eyes, processing the words she had just heard. Her grandmother had just said, in front of the whole family, that she wasn't a real granddaughter. "Dorothy," Jennifer said, her voice low but laden with a controlled fury I had rarely seen. "You just said that in front of an 8-year-old. "I just told the truth," Dorothy replied, lifting her chin defiantly. "I don't see why you all are reacting so dramatically. Emma seems like a smart girl. She can understand the difference between." "Stop. Now." My voice came out so low and dangerous that even Dorothy hesitated. But the damage was already done. I looked at Emma and saw something that broke my heart completely. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming or throwing a tantrum. She was just shrinking. Literally shrinking into her chair, as if she wanted to disappear, as if she finally understood why she always felt different at these family gatherings. For 6 years, my daughter had internalized the subtle message that she didn't fully belong in our family. And now, at 8 years old, she had just heard it said out loud bluntly, by the person who was supposed to be her protective grandmother. "Emma," I called softly, "do you want to go outside and play in the yard for a few minutes?" She nodded quickly and ran out, her gold sneakers shining as she disappeared through the back door. As soon as the door closed, I turned to Dorothy with a calmness that even frightened me. "Mom, you just destroyed an 8-year-old's self-esteem in front of the whole family. A child he legally adopted, who carries his last name, who has called him Dad for 6 years. "Blake, you've always been so sensitive," Dorothy began, but Michael interrupted her. "Mom, that was too far," my younger brother said, his voice heavy with discomfort. "Emma is an innocent child. She didn't deserve to hear that." David nodded, looking genuinely upset. "I've never heard you talk like that about a child, her. It's not right." For the first time in 6 years, my brothers were on my side. For the first time, they were seeing Dorothy through the same eyes I had learned to use, the eyes of someone who recognized toxic behavior disguised as family tradition. Dorothy looked around the room, searching for allies, but found only uncomfortable faces and evasive glances. "You're all overreacting," she muttered, but her voice had lost its unwavering authority. That's when I decided it was time to reveal the second letter. "Dad," I said calmly, pulling a sealed white envelope from my pocket, "Emma wasn't the only person who wrote something for you today." Dorothy stared at the envelope as if it were a poisonous snake. "What is this?" "6 years of documentation," I replied, my voice steady and controlled. "Every derogatory comment. Every inferior gift. Every time he referred to Emma as his daughter, instead of her granddaughter. Every family event from which he deliberately excluded her." Jennifer looked at him in surprise. She didn't know about the second letter. No one did. For the past 3 months, since the incident at Tommy's birthday party, I had been meticulously documenting every interaction between Dorothy and Emma. Not just the recent ones, but reconstructing 6 years of memories, checking dates, discreetly talking to family members, even reviewing old photos from family parties. Did you know that in 6 years of family photos, Emma appears in less than half of them? I continued, my voice gaining strength. And in the ones in which she appears, she's always on the edges, never in the center with the other children? Did you know that for the last 3 Christmases, his gifts to Emma averaged $15, while the gifts to Tommy and Maddie cost over $100 each? Dorothy was turning pale. Did you know that Emma asked her if she was really part of our family after the last Easter party? Because you organized an egg hunt and said it was only for blood grandchildren? I never said that. Dorothy protested. David interrupted gently, you did say. Jennifer and I heard you. We thought it was a misunderstanding, but now. What my siblings didn't know was that I had started recording some of these interactions over the past few months. Not maliciously, but as a way to validate his own sanity. When you hear subtly cruel comments for years, you start to wonder if you're imagining things. But he wasn't imagining things. And he had proof. Blake, where are you going with this? Dorothy asked, her voice now clearly defensive. I'm getting to the fact that he has a choice to make today, I replied, holding the envelope between us like a bridge or a barrier. You can open this letter, read exactly what impact his behavior has had on an innocent child for 6 years, and decide to be the grandmother Emma deserves. Or. I paused, letting the weight of the alternative hang in the air. Or what? Dorothy challenged. Or Emma will never have to feel inferior at a family gathering again. Because there will be no more family gatherings. At least, not for us. The ultimatum came out of my mouth with a clarity that surprised me. For 6 years, I had avoided direct confrontation, hoping that Dorothy would change naturally, that his heart would open up over time. But closed hearts don't open on their own. Sometimes they need a reality check. Dorothy snatched the envelope from my hands with a sharp movement. Very well. I'll read his precious letter. But if this is an attempt to emotionally blackmail him. It's not blackmail, Mom, I replied calmly. It's accountability. It's responsibility for his actions. It's a chance to see what he's done through the eyes of a child who just wanted to be loved by her grandmother. As Dorothy opened the envelope with trembling fingers, I looked out the window and saw Emma sitting alone on the swing in the backyard, her little legs dangling in the air, still wearing the gold dress she had chosen especially to impress Grandma. My daughter didn't know it, but her life was about to change completely. Dorothy began to read the letter silently, and I watched her expression gradually change from defensive to shocked, from shocked to pale, from pale to something approaching horror. Because this second letter didn't just contain cold documentation of events. It contained Emma's words, her own words that I had collected over the months, her innocent questions, her attempts to understand why she felt different, her little comments that revealed the profound impact of unequal treatment. Daddy, why does Grandma Dorothy always forget my name when she introduces me to her friends? Daddy, did he do something wrong to make Grandma not like him? Daddy, when he grows up, will he be a real granddaughter? Every question Dorothy was reading was a stab in the conscience of anyone with an ounce of empathy. And under each question, I had written the exact date and context that prompted it. Dorothy finished reading and dropped the letter on the table as if it were on fire. Blake, she whispered, her voice completely different now, I didn't know. I didn't realize that. That your actions had consequences? I finished for her. That an 8-year-old was processing every rejection, every exclusion, every sign that she wasn't good enough for her grandmother? That's when I heard the back door open and her small footsteps coming back into the room. She stopped in the doorway, looking at all of us with those big, intelligent eyes, clearly sensing that something important had happened. Daddy, she said in her small voice, can I go home now? I'm tired. My 8-year-old daughter was tired. Tired of trying to fit in. Tired of accepting crumbs of affection. Tired of being treated as less than she was. I was tired too. Of course, sweetheart, I replied, getting up from my chair. Let's go home. But as I walked toward Emma, Dorothy abruptly stood up from her chair. Wait, she said, her voice breaking. Blake, wait. I want to fix this. I slowly turned to face her, Emma holding her hand. Mom, some things can't be fixed with words. Only with actions. And actions take time to prove they're genuine. Dorothy looked at Emma, then at then at the letter still on the table. What do you want him to do? She asked, and for the first time in 6 years, I heard genuine humility in her voice. That's when I knew his plan had worked. It wasn't about revenge. It was about awakening a conscience that had been dormant for too long. And now, looking into his mother's regretful eyes, I prepared to present the terms that would determine whether his family could be rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect, or whether Emma and he would start his own holiday tradition, far away from people who made her feel small. Dorothy stared at the second letter on the table as if it were evidence of a crime she didn't remember committing. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to process the magnitude of what she had just read. "Blake, this is way out of line," she muttered, but her voice had lost all authority. "You documented private conversations? You recorded family interactions as if they were, I don't know, evidence of something terrible." "They weren't private conversations, Mom," he replied calmly, keeping Emma by his side. "They were public situations, in front of the whole family, where you consistently treated my daughter like a second-class citizen." Jennifer approached us, taking Emma's free hand with a look that mixed support and admiration. She didn't know about the extent of the documentation I had collected over the past 3 months, but she could see that something much bigger was going on. "When did he start doing this?" Jennifer asked in a whisper. "After Tommy's birthday," he replied, looking directly at Dorothy. "When Emma asked her if she was the other children's cousin too." The truth was that my plan had begun long before that. For years, he had noted inconsistencies in Dorothy's treatment of Emma, always hoping it was just a period of adjustment. But 3 months ago, when I heard my 8-year-old daughter questioning his place in the family, I understood that the pattern was not accidental. It was deliberate. Dorothy composed herself slightly, assuming the defensive tone I had known since childhood when she was confronted with something she didn't want to admit. "Blake, you're turning normal situations into something sinister. Every family has its dynamics. I've always treated Emma with affection." "His mom," I interrupted, taking my phone out of his pocket. "Do you want me to play the recording from the Easter party? When she organized the egg hunt and said verbatim that it was for biological grandchildren only?" The silence that followed was so deep that I could hear the air conditioner turning on upstairs. David and Michael exchanged uncomfortable glances. Her wives stopped fiddling with their phones. Even the children, who had returned to the living room, realized that something very serious was happening. Did you record that?" Dorothy asked, her voice coming out as a whisper. "I documented 3 months of family interactions," I replied calmly. "Not out of malice, but to make sure I wasn't imagining things. To validate what Emma was feeling and what Jennifer had been observing for years. During those 3 months, I had become a silent but meticulous observer of family dynamics. I carried a small digital recorder in my pocket during family gatherings, not to use against Dorothy maliciously, but to have concrete evidence of patterns that were easy to deny when questioned in isolation. Because Dorothy was a master of subtle gaslighting. When confronted about a specific incident, her explanation was always plausible. Emma was tired, or I didn't want to overwhelm the girl, or I thought she would prefer to play with something more appropriate for her age. Individually, each incident could be justified. Collectively, they formed an undeniable pattern of discrimination. "What else have you documented?" Dorothy asked, and for the first time I heard genuine fear in her voice. "The Christmas gift lists from the last 5 years," I replied, watching her reaction. "With the exact prices of each item. The family photos where Emma appears versus where she doesn't. The family events she wasn't invited to versus those where she had to ask permission to attend." Jennifer looked at me with a mixture of shock and admiration. She knew he was documenting some incidents, but not the full extent of what he had collected. But the most revealing documentation, I continued, was Emma's own words. His innocent questions, her comments about how she felt during visits, her attempts to understand why she was treated differently. Dorothy attempted one last defensive approach. "Blake, this is emotional manipulation. You're using a child to create unnecessary drama." "No," Emma said for the first time since returning from the backyard, her voice small but surprisingly firm. "Daddy didn't teach me to feel bad. I already felt bad. Daddy just told me it was okay to talk about it." The simplicity and honesty of Emma's statement cut through all of Dorothy's justifications like a hot knife through butter. Michael rose from his chair, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Look, maybe we should all take a break to process this," he said diplomatically. "Obviously there are misunderstandings here that can be resolved." "There are no misunderstandings," Jennifer said firmly. "There is an 8-year-old child who has spent 6 years trying to earn her grandmother's love, only to find out today that she was never considered a real granddaughter. Dorothy looked around the room, seeking support, but found only uncomfortable faces and evasive glances. Even my father had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tense tone of the voices, and was watching the scene with a confused expression. "Frank," Dorothy called to my father, "tell them I've always treated Emma well." My father, a man of few words who normally avoided family conflicts, looked at Emma, then at Dorothy, then at me. "Dorothy," he said slowly, "you gave $100 to each of the other children today and a candle to Emma." The fact that even his father, who rarely paid attention to subtle family dynamics, had noticed the difference was the final blow to Dorothy's defense. That was... "I wasn't thinking clearly," Dorothy muttered, but her words sounded hollow even to her. That's when I decided to reveal the last card in my plan. "Mom, during these 3 months of documentation, I discovered something that goes beyond unequal treatment," I said calmly, taking a folder out of my coat's inside pocket. "I discovered conversations between her and other people about Emma. Conversations that she didn't know were being reported to me." Dorothy turned pale instantly. "What are you talking about?" "My cousin Rachel," I replied, watching recognition appear in Dorothy's eyes. "She told me about the conversation you had at the market last month. When you said Emma would never be a real granddaughter, because you can't invent blood." Dorothy tried to deny it, but her expression had already confirmed the truth. "And my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson," I continued, "who heard you explain to other women at church why Emma wasn't in the family photos you share on social media." During those 3 months, I discovered that Dorothy had been surprisingly vocal about his feelings toward Emma with people outside the immediate family. People who, when they learned that I was Emma's father, felt compelled to share these conversations with me. "You built a whole public narrative about why Emma doesn't deserve be treated like your other granddaughters," I said, my voice rising in intensity. "And he did this while smiling at her at family gatherings. If you're following this story of how a father discovered he needed to protect his daughter from her own grandmother, be sure to subscribe to the channel because what happened next changed our family forever." Dorothy was now completely cornered. The evidence wasn't just about isolated moments of unequal treatment, but about a sustained campaign of exclusion that she had proudly defended to anyone who would listen. "Blake," she finally said, her voice breaking, "what do you want from me?" "I want you to choose," he replied, picking Emma up. "You can acknowledge that Emma is her granddaughter, offer a genuine apology, and work to rebuild a relationship based on equal respect and love. Or..." I paused, letting the weight of the alternative hang in the air. "Or he can continue to believe that family love is determined by biology, and we can stop pretending we're welcome here." Dorothy looked at Emma, then at me, then at the evidence folder still in my hands. I need time to think," she murmured. "Mom," I replied softly, "Emma has already waited 6 years for you. How much longer does an 8-year-old need to wait to feel loved by her grandmother?" That's when Emma did something none of us expected. She broke free from my arms, walked over to Dorothy, and held out her little hand. "Grandma Dorothy," she said with that brutal honesty that only children possess, "if you really love me, can you just give me a normal hug? Like you give the other grandchildren?" And in that moment, watching an 8-year-old offer her grandmother one last chance at redemption, I knew that no matter what Dorothy's answer was, Emma had already won. Dorothy stared at Emma's outstretched hand as if it were a poisonous snake. Her eyes darted between my daughter's hopeful little face and his impassive one, quickly calculating her options. For a moment, I thought he would do the right thing. For a second, I saw something that looked like humanity cross his expression. Then he backed away. "Emma dear," Dorothy said in that voice of hers that was both sweet and icy, "I'm sorry, but I can't do that." For a moment, I thought she would do the right thing. For a second, I saw something that looked like humanity cross her expression. Then she backed away. "Emma dear," Dorothy said in that forced sweet voice, "you don't understand. This is adult talk. Why don't you go play outside while—" "No," Emma said firmly, surprising everyone in the room. "I do understand. You don't want to give me a hug because you don't love him the way you love his other grandchildren." The silence that followed was deafening. Dorothy attempted one last defensive maneuver. "Emma, that's not true. I just—" "Then hug me," Emma insisted, her voice small but determined. "The same way you hug Tommy and Maddie." Dorothy looked around the room desperately, seeking support, but found only tense, expectant faces. Even my father had moved closer, watching the scene with an expression that mixed confusion and growing understanding. "Blake," Dorothy murmured, "this is emotional manipulation." That's when I completely lost my patience. "Emotional manipulation?" I repeated, my voice coming out louder than I intended. "Mom, an 8-year-old child is asking for a hug from her grandmother. If that's manipulation to him, then the problem is much bigger than I imagined." Jennifer stood up, walking over to Emma and placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Dorothy," Jennifer said with dangerous calm, "her granddaughter is asking for affection. That should be automatic, not a negotiation." "She's not her," Dorothy began, but stopped abruptly when she realized what she was about to say in front of Emma. But it was too late. The damage was done. Emma slowly dropped her hand. His eyes filling with tears, she bravely tried to hold back. "It's okay," she whispered. "I understand." It was at that moment that he made the most important decision of his life as a father. "No, sweetheart," he said, kneeling in front of Emma and holding her small shoulders. "You don't understand. This isn't about you. It never was about you." I stood up and looked Dorothy straight in the eye. "Dad, you just publicly rejected an 8-year-old who just wanted his love. In front of the whole family. And now you're going to find out exactly what the consequences of that are." Dorothy frowned, confused. "Blake, what are you talking about?" I took my phone out of my pocket and started dialing a number. "I'm talking about the conversations I've had with a family lawyer over the past 2 weeks, I replied calmly. "About documentation of family discrimination against a minor. About creating a hostile environment for an adopted child." The color drained from Dorothy's face. "You can't be serious." "Hello, Mr. Martinez?" I said into the phone, keeping my eyes fixed on Dorothy. "Yes, this is Blake. We just had the incident we discussed." "Yes, in front of witnesses." "Perfect. I'll see you Monday." I hung up the phone and put it back in my pocket. "Blake," Michael interjected nervously, "you can't be thinking of suing our mother." "I'm not suing anyone," I replied calmly. "I'm protecting my daughter. And if that means legally formalizing that certain people cannot have access to her, then that's what he's going to do." Dorothy finally found her voice. "That's ridiculous. You can't stop me from seeing my own." "My what?" I interrupted. "You just made it very clear that Emma is not his granddaughter. Therefore, he has no rights to her." It was then that I revealed the ace up my sleeve that I had been holding for 3 months. "But there's something you don't know, Mom," I continued, pulling one last folder out of my pocket. "During my investigation over the last 3 months, I discovered something interesting about inheritance laws in the state." Dorothy paled even more. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Grandpa Arthur's will," I replied, watching the recognition appear in her eyes. "Remember his? His father, whom you adored so much." My grandfather's will had been read 17 years ago, but I had recently requested an official copy as part of my family documentation. "His grandfather Arthur left a specific trust for all legitimate great-grandchildren of the family," I continued. "And guess what I found out when I consulted an estate lawyer?" Dorothy was now visibly shaking. "Emma, as my legal adopted daughter, automatically qualifies as a legitimate great-grandchild for inheritance purposes. She is entitled to an equal share of the trust when she turns 18. The value of my grandfather's trust had grown significantly over the past 17 years. We were talking about approximately $100,000 per eligible great-grandchild. But," I continued, my voice taking on a more serious tone, "there is an interesting clause that allows for the exclusion of beneficiaries in cases of documented family hostility." Dorothy abruptly rose from her chair. "Blake, you can't be suggesting." "I'm not suggesting anything," I replied calmly. "I'm just informing you that his attitude toward Emma is being officially documented. And if a judge determines that there has been systematic discrimination against a minor beneficiary, well, that could affect the distribution of the entire trust." The truth was, I wasn't sure if this was legally viable, but I had consulted 3 different lawyers, and they all agreed it was worth investigating. Michael and he looked at each other nervously. They were also beneficiaries of the trust, just as his children were. "Blake," David said carefully, "maybe we should all talk this through calmly." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied firmly. "Emma is mine. She is legally part of this family. And if anyone can't accept that, then we don't need him in our lives. It was then that Dorothy made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Blake, this is blackmail. He's using money to... No, I interrupted, my voice coming out with an authority I didn't even know I possessed. You used rejection to hurt a child for 6 years. I'm using consequences to protect her. Emma had been listening quietly, absorbing every word. Then, surprisingly, she approached me and held my hand. Daddy, she said in her small but clear voice, can I say something? I knelt down in front of her again. Of course, sweetheart. What do you want to say? Emma looked directly at Dorothy. Grandma Dorothy, I don't want his money. I just wanted her to like me. But now I understand that he can't. And that's okay. She turned to me. Daddy, can I go home now? I want to draw something new. The silence that followed was absolutely devastating. An 8-year-old child had just demonstrated more dignity and emotional maturity than any adult in the room. Dorothy slumped back into his chair, tears finally streaming down his face. Emma, he whispered, But Emma was already walking toward the door, holding my hand tightly. Daddy's right, she said without turning around. Family is who really loves you. And I already have a real family. As we left the house, I heard Dorothy begin to sob. But for the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt proud. Proud of my brave daughter, who had faced rejection with dignity. Proud of myself, for finally finding the courage to protect her. And as we closed the door behind us, I knew that Emma would never feel small or less important again. Because she had discovered something that no amount of money or grandmotherly approval could buy, her own strength. In the car, Emma asked me a question that changed everything. Daddy, now that Grandma Dorothy has shown us who he really is, are we going to have our own family parties? And that's when I realized that true revenge wasn't publicly humiliating Dorothy or threatening her with legal action. True revenge would be to create for Emma exactly the kind of loving and inclusive environment that Dorothy had refused to offer. But what happened the following Monday, when I received an unexpected phone call, would change the course of our entire story in a way that none of us had anticipated. The following Monday, I received a call that would change everything. Blake? It's Jennifer. You won't believe this. Dorothy called crying. I stopped making Emma's breakfast. What do you mean? She said she spent the whole weekend thinking. She said he wants to talk to you. That she needs to apologize properly. I looked at Emma, drawing quietly at the kitchen table. She had woken up humming, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Emma said without looking up from her drawing, if Grandma Dorothy wants to visit me, she can. But now I know I'm special even if she can't see it. 2 weeks later, Dorothy showed up at our door. Not with expensive gifts or empty promises, but with genuine tears and a framed photo, the photo Emma had given her, now framed and placed in a place of honor in her living room. Emma, Dorothy said, kneeling in our entryway, will you forgive me for being a terrible grandmother? Emma looked at her for a long moment. You can try again, Grandma. But this time, you have to really love me. Dorothy nodded, tears streaming down her face. Can I give you that hug now? The hug lasted a full 5 minutes. 6 months later, Dorothy threw Emma her first birthday party where she was truly the star. All of her cousins were there, including Tommy, who now calls Emma his favorite cousin. Emma taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about protecting the ones you love, even when it's hard. If this story touched his heart and he believes that every child deserves to be loved unconditionally, subscribe to the channel. We have more stories about families who discovered that true love knows no barriers. In the end, Dorothy didn't lose a granddaughter. She gained a second chance to be the grandmother Emma always deserved. And Emma? She never questioned her place in any family again.